Hi guys, I'm here to show you my 1973 VW delivery van. It's part of the fleet in my business, which is Goode Plumbing, located in Chicago. We are actually getting ready to sell this bus. It's a very big and important part of our business, but we've got 3 of them. For the last 12 years or so, they've been used as everyday service vehicles in our business. And the reason I'm selling them is out of respect for the vehicles. I don't want to put them through the winter anymore. Chicago salts its roads like crazy, and so while they've all been mechanically extremely reliable, the salt and the different employees have taken their toll on it. You've got 15 different drivers driving these, and they get beat up over the years. So it's just time to put a little respect towards the vehicles and sell one of them, and we're going to refurbish one of them and use it in marketing because they are a very big, important part of our business. If you go online and Google Goode Plumbing, you'll find this very bus pops up a lot on our billboards, on our print ads. So it's been a great part of our business, but it's time to let it retire. Hopefully somebody will buy it and give it a little easier life than we have. If not, it'll hold up for you just fine. So I've gotten asked by some people, why didn't you use a split window, which is a 67 and older bus, and they're cuter and a little more iconic. But there's a few reasons that I haven't. I wanted to show you some of those features of a late model bus like this, and then I'm going to go over the condition of this exact vehicle. So I chose 73 and newer buses for a few reasons. One of the most important is safety. While no bus is going to be anywhere close to as safe as a modern vehicle, I wanted to get a vehicle that was as safe as possible. So in 1973, Volkswagen completely redesigned the front structure of the vehicle. They look really similar to the earlier models, the 68 through 71s or 72s. However, behind the front sheet metal, they're a lot different. Starting up front with behind the bumper is this reinforcement deformation panel. It's a really strong beam, and that is actually tied into, if we go down below, it connects into this Y-brace frame. And that transfers energy back to the front beam, which is a very strong part of the vehicle, probably one of the strongest parts of the entire truck. And that is bolted to the frame. So in a crash, rather than the earlier models, which were just sheet metal up here, this actually does have quite a bit of strength. So that was one of the most important reasons, since I was putting other drivers in this vehicle. I wanted to make them as safe as I could. Speaking of which, we also added inertia wheel seatbelts to it. The other seatbelts were not that style. They were the original style. We had to adjust them, and then you couldn't have any movement, so we did upgrade the seatbelts as well. The other thing too that came about in these late model buses were power front disc brakes. So not only do they haul the bus from 60 to 0 or 70 to 0 in a much shorter distance than an earlier model, they're a lot easier to use in day-to-day use. And they've got a really good feel. In fact, in my opinion, I've got a 2019 Ford F-150 as well, and these have a much better feel than even a modern vehicle like that. In fact, there was a road test back in the day that recorded the 60 to 0 distance in 123 feet, which is really short. Even by today's standards, it's really good. Then moving along to the back, there's another section of argument, I guess you'd say, among bus owners. Up through 71, they used a Type 1 engine, which is basically a Beetle engine. And in my opinion, it was barely adequate in a Beetle and completely inadequate in a large, heavy vehicle like the bus. Now, I know a lot of early bay window owners are not going to like me saying that, but that's just the honest truth. I think that while the Type 1 engine was an aesthetically more pleasing engine and maybe more true to the bus's heritage, in terms of actually using it, this is heads and shoulders a much better engine. It's got a lot higher torque. It cut the 0 to 60 time. When VW came out with the Type 4 engine in the bus in 72, it literally, came close to cutting the 0 to 60 time in half. This thing will do 70 miles an hour on the highway all day long, whereas a 70 or 71 bus needed an overhaul every 75,000 miles or so if you took care of it. This will do 200,000 miles between overhauls. In fact, I put 140,000 miles on this myself and have never had the heads off or anything like that. The only time the engine's ever been out was for a clutch replacement about 5 years ago. Now, the 73 would have had a 1.7 liter dual carbureted engine. This is a 2 liter fuel injected engine that was installed by the previous owner in Arizona. And that's another argument that a lot of bus owners have, is the fuel injection. Some people don't like it, and they remove the fuel injection and install carburetors, and I think that is a huge mistake on a stock Volkswagen engine. The fuel injection on these is completely reliable. I've been driving this every day for 12 years. The only thing that I've ever had an issue with it on the fuel injection was a cylinder temperature head sensor that was bad when I bought it. We had that replaced, and this thing has been 100% reliable since then. You run the problems when people that don't know what they're doing try to work on these injection systems, and they give up and replace them with carburetors. If you take the time to learn about them, you'll find that it's an excellent system. The emissions are lower. They start in any kind of weather. This thing sits outside, and it started in sub-zero weather, no problem. There's very little maintenance to do on it. This is a solid lifter engine, whereas the 78 and 79 had hydraulic lifters. So you do have to do a valve adjustment on it we do it about every 5,000 miles or so. It's got electronic ignition in it, so there's no maintenance on there. So, my opinion is that the Type 4 engine is the superior engine to the Type 1 in terms of actual use. And you add the fuel injection on there, and you've really got a relatively modern package. So moving up, Reese is going to demonstrate the size of the space for you. So moving up to the cargo area, it does have a fairly high liftover because of the rear engine, but it still holds quite a bit of, it's still got a pretty good capacity. It's got 177 cubic feet of space. As you can see, we're a service plumbing company, so we had it outfitted with shelves, and it's a pack rat drawer on the bottom. There's drawers that roll out of there. A 50-gallon water heater will fit in here in the box. A 75-gallon will go in here out of the box. We've had to do that once or twice. We just use a lot of moving blankets. But when it came to anything over 50-gallon, we try to have it delivered to the job site anyway. But it holds quite a bit, and it's actually the suspension's rated for a full ton, which is really pretty impressive. Moving on the side, it's also got a nice size sliding cargo door. I want to say that the VW bus was the first to offer a sliding side door, and they offered them on both sides. In the United States, they came standard on the right side of the vehicle. In other countries where the steering wheel was on the right, they came standard on the left side, but it was an option to have them on both. I've seen very few late models that have that though, but there was an option. We actually added this padlock because you can see at one point somebody did break into this and got some equipment out of it. It's just part of living in the city, unfortunately. I'm not going to open this door for you because, as you can see, one of the things on this bus is that there's quite a bit of rust, and the sliding door track needs to be replaced on this. And so it makes the door really difficult to open and close right now. One thing that people are surprised to hear is that the bus is actually very aerodynamic in terms of shape. I've heard I've heard people say that they are as aerodynamic as a brick, and that's actually quite untrue. They had a drag coefficient of, I want to say, 0.039, which is actually more slippery in shape than a Beetle of the same era. So of course you've got to figure in the frontal area with that, but the shape itself is actually very slippery. VW did quite a bit of wind tunnel testing on these back in the day. Okay, moving inside, my son is going to demonstrate the driving position. If you've never sat in a bus, it's pretty unique. I actually find it very, very comfortable. But you are definitely doing a bus driver position. So I find myself leaning forward on the steering wheel quite a bit, and it's really comfortable to rest on. After you drive one of these for a while, you'll find that other vehicles are less comfortable, which is another thing that people are surprised to hear. Okay, I'm going to do a quick walk around just to show you the condition of it. It's basically in pretty good straight condition, but again, the Chicago winters have taken its toll. You've got the dog legs down here and the footstep. Moving along the left rockers, the rockers are pretty well gone. You've got some rust along the rear fenders, rear wheel arches. rear apron has rust all along it. Moving along the right, you've got the same thing along the rear wheel arch, the lower rear quarter panel, and the sliding door track. Again, the same thing on the passenger side with the wheel arches, the dog legs, and the inner step. Surprisingly enough, however, is that the floors and the frame rails are in pretty good shape. Everything is pretty solid under here. The front beam's in pretty good order, but there is that lower outer body rust. And it's unfortunate because the rest of the truck is pretty nice. And like I said, I got this bus out in Arizona, so it spent the first 35 years as a carpenter's van. And then a few years before I got it, the first 30 years as a carpenter's van out in the Southwest. And then I got it from a Volkswagen collector out there who had a yard full of them and was getting married. And his fiance told him he was able to keep one, and this was not the one. When I bought it, actually, the whole vehicle was painted in Japanese animation. So my friend and her dad picked it up for me, and they have it shipped back into Chicago, and they were a little surprised when they saw it, to say the least. So I'm gonna do a little drive around with it, just so you can hear how it sounds, and then we'll take you for a ride.
Do not judge my camera shaking.
Okay, before we take you for a ride, I'm just going to go over the interior a little bit of the bus. So the instrument panel was redesigned for 1968. It was completely different than the split window models. It's got the safety padding on the dashboard, which was required by the safety standards of the day. Instrumentation is pretty basic, just like any air-cooled Volkswagen. You had a speedometer and a gas gauge and a series of warning lights. Over here is the headlight switch. Down below is it's an electric button that we added for the windshield washer. VW continued to use the windshield washer that operated off of air pressure from the spare tire. However, the spare tire takes up a lot of cargo room, and since we're using this for a service van, we needed as much space as we could, so we converted it to electric. Some people do mount the spare tire on the front of these, and I'm really not a big fan of how that looks. Moving over here, you've got a brake warning light. Ours is missing the cover. Over here, you've got the controls for the standard heater, which takes heat from a heat exchanger in the engine compartment. The control on this side turns it on. Once you get down to a pretty lower, down towards the bottom, it kicks on a blower fan as well. This changes from heat, which are down by the floor vents, and moves it up to defrost and move it down. You've got some vents on the side, and it actually works halfway decent. It's not enough for Chicago winter, realistically, which is why we added a Webasto gas heater, which is a modern version of the original option that was available on these when they were new. This is a modern version. It's safer, much more compact. It's probably a third the size, and it puts out quite a bit of heat. So this vehicle actually does have really good heat. Really good heat in it. Got a pretty basic radio. If you want to move back to the 1990s, you've got that right here. It's a removable faceplate. Glove box here. Down below that is the air conditioning unit. This is the controls for the air conditioning. It's a modern unit. We had it installed right after we got the bus, so it's almost 12 years old now. This particular system was made by a company called Gilmore Enterprises. There are a couple of manufacturers that make air conditioning kits for these, and another thing I've seen online, which is just completely not true, is that the air conditioning systems rob a lot of power from these, and that might be true of the old units from the 70s, but these modern units only take about maybe 1 or 2 horsepower. It's almost unnoticeable, and the air conditioning is really nice to have. moving a little farther down, you've got the parking brake, gear shift lever, 4-speed manual transmission. Automatic was available on these, but this one does not have that. I actually prefer the 4-speed in these anyway. They didn't have a huge amount of power, so having this manual transmission allows you to wind it out in each gear and use most of that power. Having said that, let's take you for a ride. I apologize in advance because there is a fair amount of noise in this vehicle. Like we've got the pipe rack on top that actually still has some piping in it. We've got some metal shelving and so forth. So just like any work van, old or new, there is a bit of noise in it. Hear it or not, but the engine in this bus, it runs just excellent. We've always taken really good care of it since it is a service vehicle. So anytime it's needed a tune-up or anything like that, I've made sure it's gotten done. We need these vehicles to be reliable. Anytime one of our trucks breaks down, it costs us time and money. So maintenance is really important. So even though this bus is far from mint condition, I would drive it across the country tomorrow. And like I mentioned, my son and I have driven it in the last couple of years for a VW camping event in O'Fallon, Missouri, which I forget how far that is. It's probably 5 or 6 hours in each direction. And I would do it again tomorrow. Like I said, it's a really, really reliable vehicle. And like I mentioned in the video on the 66 convertible that we sold, these things like to be driven. I wind them up pretty high in the gears, and you know, I think they like that. They seem to like that better than driving them easy. Volkswagens of this vintage were really meant to be driven fairly hard. We're going to get on the highway in a couple of minutes. It's another thing that I read a lot, that people are terrified to do over 50 in these, and I just don't get it. You know, the earlier split window buses were, you know, a little bit of a handful on the highway. These late model buses, again, they're not like a modern vehicle. You can't expect them to be, but they do just fine. You know, I do 70 in this thing all the time, no problem. They actually ride really good. They've got a pretty nice soft ride to them for what they are. The 0 to 60 on a single port bus was about 36 seconds. Or I'm sorry, dual port 71 bus, 0 to 60 was a little over 36 seconds. Late model bus, like in the late 70s with a 2-liter engine, I want to say I got a recorded time of about 19, which is still pretty slow, but it's really not bad. I mean, this thing keeps up with traffic without really an issue. This one's got some miles on it, so it's, you know, a little slower. I've got a 78 that's got much less miles on it, and that thing really moves out of its own way, no problem. So again, I apologize about the noise, but you can see we're doing about 60 right now. About 65, and it's fine, it's straight. You know, like I said, it's not like a modern vehicle, but it goes on the road just fine. doing 75 right now. I don't know if you can see the speedometer or not. Like I said, you'd never be able to do this in an upright engine bus that was in stock shape. They handle halfway decent. Again, you know, nothing like a modern vehicle, but you know, we're getting on a taking off ramp here right now, and it's doing okay. If you push them a little bit, they'll take it. Another thing about these is in the winter, these are just phenomenal in the snow with all the weight over the rear end. They are better by far than any of our newer vehicles. We use ProMasters and ProMaster Cities primarily, and this is definitely better than those. We also had a Ford E-Series and a Mercedes Sprinter, and in the wintertime, this is beyond compare to those vehicles. So there are a few things on this bus that don't work. It's missing there's a fresh air control here. I've actually ordered that. I don't know where it went off to. One of my guys, I don't know. I have no idea what happens sometimes. But there's a fresh air lever here that allows fresh air to come into the cabin. I do have that on order. The driver's door seal is missing because it was in such bad shape. We pulled it off of there. I do have another one of those on its way, so that'll be replaced before the vehicle goes to its new home. The horn does not work, the turn signals and four-ways don't flash. The brake warning light does come on when you press the brakes. However, the brakes on this work fantastic. So, and there's no leaks in the system, so I'm pretty sure that it is just a brake light switch on this. That's bad. But this is a really good, reliable vehicle. Whether you're using it for a surfing bus or for running around in, or just to bring to shows. Like I said, the only real issue is the cosmetics. The lower 5 inches are rusted out. If you are going to use this bus for work like we did, or for other uses where you need to get in the sliding side door, you've got to get that sliding door valve replaced. The door is really hard to open and close with it being so rotted out like that. But other than that, it's a good, solid, reliable bus. And like I said, these old Volkswagens have so much character. They're a lot of fun to drive, and they're really, really useful. That's what's neat about them. You can get parts easy for them. They're really reliable. So I think whatever you're using this bus for, get the sliding door panel replaced. If you want to do the body and paint work on it, great. If not, then go ahead and use it as it is and enjoy it and not worry about it.